So welcome to the third Young Economist debate. It's been at 2 conferences already, and they were stitched up, rigged, full of people who were not young economists, right? But this time we're going to do it right by having it organized by the same people, their housemates, and their supervisors. Just like Greece, exactly. So today's debate is going to be a topic chosen by the young economists. And it's going to be about economics education needs saving in Australia. So people have assigned sides, so they may not be arguing for what they actually believe in. So if you throw tomatoes, make sure to miss them. Right? The way that this will happen is that we want a sort of a fair and open debate. So the nay side, those who will argue, look, there's nothing wrong, go first. Then the yay side, it needs saving, go second, and then we alternate. Each speaker gets 10 minutes, then we have time for a rebuttal, they get another 5 minutes, and then you are asked to vote, just by a show of hands, who you think is the better argumenter, right? So you're going to be deciding, so you've got to think, okay, whose side is persuading me? Now, in previous years, I won't name any names, but the audience was stacked. It was completely unfair. It was full of PhDs who were just voting for their friends. I'm not saying that because I was on the other side. I'm just saying it because we could all see. So I want you to lay off your biased hats and give everybody a good go. So on the yay side, we have Farhana and Abby. On the nay side, we have Alicia and Alison. Please welcome them, and the nay side may start. 10 minutes.
It was here just a few moments ago. Now it's gone. Yeah, that's a bad sign. Oh, there it
That
is.
one?
Okay.
Cool.
Fantastic. Terrific. Okay. So I must say, before I begin, how nice it is to be on a panel of economists where there are 4 women. I have to say it's a first. It's a first for me, and I suspect it's a first for many other people on the panel. But it's a very, very great pleasure. Now, today I'm arguing that economics education does not need saving in Australia. So I'm going to have to remind myself of that periodically. Because it may not always be my opinion. But what I want to do is to move on to the next screen. Or is this not working? Okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background first about what's been happening with universities over the last few years. Some of you may not have been in Australia when the Bradley Review took place. And the Bradley Review essentially introduced demand-driven entitlement to university places, and the number of students who could be admitted was uncapped from 2012 onwards. And at the same time, there were ongoing reductions in the supply of government funding to higher education, something that we still, unfortunately, see. And the government aimed for 20% of undergraduate degree enrollments from the lower socioeconomic groups by 2020. And over the last decade, some G of 8 universities non-G of 8 universities have removed undergraduate economics degrees. Indeed, economics has been actively run down where student demand is low or where managers have other priorities. And I think those of us who are practicing in academia all know what that means. And What this effectively means is that lower socioeconomic groups, students, have less access to economics degrees. They're less likely to enter the old universities that offer economics degrees. And there's a little bit of data here that will show this. This shows that the drop in entry requirements over this period is most notable in the non-G of 8 universities. So you can see that it's dropped from 73 to 65. These are the ATAR scores, whereas the average for the G of 8 is around 88 to 89 over this period. But hey, why should we care? I'm arguing that economics education doesn't need saving in Australia. What we see here is that we are heading, I think, towards the situation that happened before the reform, before the combining of the old universities with the new universities. And if you view economics, I'm arguing my case most strongly here, if you view economics like medicine or dentistry or veterinary science, maybe you only need a few campuses offering economics courses. Maybe that's all we need. Maybe we only need half a dozen, or maybe we don't. So we'll hear from the other side a bit more about that. So also very important is student enrollments in Australia in economics over the period. And these, over the period 2008 to 2013, numbers declined in Australia. And this is a real contrast to Britain, where numbers of students enrolling in economics degrees increased by 50%. 50%. So while numbers in economics overall have been declining, business management and marketing numbers have been increasing. And there's also been an increase in university managers and in university managers who are what we might say are obsessed with what Cribb and Goetz say is gloss and spin. And some of us know what that means. Some of us have seen 6 different varieties of carpet appear in our hallways, costing over 3 million, do raise tendency. But that's only managers. Economics is okay. It's just the managers, the university managers who are obsessed with this. So what about the ERA? Well, the 2012 ERA outcomes showed 33 universities submitted to FOR 14, that's economics and econometrics. And some universities are doing really well in the ERA, and they're not all or only the old universities. Some of the new universities are doing really well in the ERA as well. But there is a long tail, and that is something that needs to concern us, I think. Now, because I've spent much of my working life in Britain, in the British set of British universities, I just want to do a little contrast with them. Okay, half time. So tuition fees were introduced in Britain in 1998, and they're now set at a maximum of £9,000. Now, with current exchange rates, that's $18,000. And by far the most common economics programs offered in 2012 in Britain in the UK were economics, the most common, business economics, and then financial economics. Names which we don't see so much of here. And here is a statistic. The number of students doing economics has increased by 50% over this period, 2003 to 4 to 2011 to 12. It's a remarkable increase. And the rates of return on UK economics degrees are relatively high. I would really like to see these figures for Australia. This study by Chevalier is in the Economics of Education review, but we should be able to see these for Australia if somebody is a labour economist and get hold of the data that we have and run some regressions. Now, what about the UK economics, the ERA, Research Assessment Exercise? In 1992, there were 60 university departments submitting to the ERA, the RAE, I'm sorry. And that had declined staggeringly to just 28 by the last RAE, which was called the RAF. So you can see that there's a big decline in the number of economics departments in Britain, too. So why is there this decline in departments submitting? Well, the least successful economics departments in terms of the RAE have merged with business and or submitted to business, or they've completely removed undergraduate economics programs. So economics has been actively run down where student demand is low. But economics is healthy in the old universities, very healthy indeed, but this has implications for low SES individuals. And economics is basically vanishing from the north of England all the way up to those outer islands. Economics is vanishing. And I think we do need to have policies, well actually I'm not allowed to argue this, am I? We do need to have policies to get low socioeconomic status individuals into economics. So what about the economics curriculum? Now, you have Wendy Carlin visiting you on Friday, and she's really interesting. I know her, and she's going to be talking about the economics curriculum. And we have to ask ourselves the question, has economics education everywhere become irrelevant, given what happened in 2008? And I think the answer is a resounding no, because the global financial crisis has drawn attention to the importance of economics globally. We all know it's really important. Okay, there was a failure in the US that had knock-on effects, but we do know that economics is really important. And Wendy Carlin, in her blog on VoxEU, which is worth reading very much, I would thoroughly recommend it, points out that this could be a golden age for economics, that recent advances in theory, that includes behavioral economics, economic history, and quantitative methods have provided tools to address pressing issues of inequality of opportunity, financial instability, and, importantly, climate change, which our beloved Prime Minister denies. So, and the other thing I'd like to point out is that at airport bookshops, if you're flicking through the books, you see that John Grisham's latest novel competes with the likes of Capital in the 21st Century by Piketty, and his royalties, I have been reliably informed, are $4.5 million US, and that was several months ago. So that's pretty interesting, and people are buying his book. Also, students are flocking to introductory economics courses. I think at your universities you may find that. We certainly find at the ANU over the last couple of years that the numbers have really grown. And not only from business and management, but there are people coming in from other areas like arts, law, of course, and even science. So economics is doing well, according to that. So let's keep these undergraduate students in there. I think it's really, really important that we have well-trained economists, not only for business and management, although that's important, not only for academia, although that's clearly important, but also, crucially, for the public service, for the public services. These are the, in every state and territory, there's a public service where well-trained economists are needed. They need to be well-trained in modeling, not only in, sorry, I've been distracted by the lady in the front row waving at me. And moreover, we want an economically literate population. That is something that should not be forgotten. We want an economically literate population as well as well-trained economists. Thank you.
Sorry, might have to go back to find our slides. Okay. Okay, thank you everyone for coming to our YE debate, firstly. My name's Kamal. I'm the president of Young Economists Queensland, and a lot of work's been put into organising this debate, so thanks for attending, firstly. Thank you to Alison for the points that you made, and I do have a lot to say. It's so tempting to rebut now, but I'm not going to do it. So our arguments essentially centre around the 7 main points which are outlined here, and I will speak to the first 5, and Farhana will speak to the latter 2. So, to begin, we are arguing that economics education needs saving in Australia, and it's something that I, having gone through essentially from undergrad all the way to PhD level, do feel quite strongly about, having spent quite a few number of years in university. So my first point is that economic education is vital for most occupations, and I now work in the private sector. I've been working in consulting the last 5 years, but I've also worked in the public sector previously. So, I've seen the different ways that economics is relevant in all these sectors. So having a fundamental understanding of basic micro and macroeconomics and statistics encourages rational thinking and forms a strong foundation for any degree. So a sound economics education is very important, particularly for business science and engineering fields of study. So for example, if you're a pharmacist and you want to go and open your own pharmacy one day, you may find that understanding the laws of supply and demand and market forces is actually quite useful in dealing with the retail side of the pharmacy business. So there are so many applications to economics out there in the real world. To my second point, I think that the current economic education is too mathematical, theoretical, and abstract in nature. So while many economics graduates may have excellent technical or mathematical skills and a sound understanding of economic theory, and I've certainly met many of them, the question is, does this adequately equip them to succeed in today's workforce? And unfortunately, the anecdotal evidence out there suggests otherwise. So according to an article that was published in The Economist in February this year, many employers actually complain that while today's economic graduates are technically strong and look good on paper, in the real world, they're not succeeding as well as they should be, mainly due to a lack of commercial awareness and understanding of the complexities of real-world thinking. No understanding of everyday business problems, and inadequate knowledge of current policies, and limited exposure, if you will, to the burning issues in a variety of industries, limited critical thinking and practical application, and I think in particular what's most worrying is inadequate oral and written communication skills and a lack of people skills necessary to relate to clients and stakeholders. And that doesn't matter if you're in the public sector, private sector, or otherwise. In addition, the quality of the economic education obtained is dependent on the way in which mandatory and elective subjects are arranged in each respective economics degree. And many economics graduates are entering the workforce without the ability to build a basic cost-benefit analysis or input-output model using Excel, and are reliant on the-job learning to develop these skills. So these are some of the issues that are worrying employers today, if you will, and what they're thinking about when that graduate is sitting in front of them after their first job, essentially. To my third point, the job market for economic graduates has changed. So I think gone are the days where economists were mainly employed either in academia or in the hallowed halls of Treasury, the Reserve Bank, or the public sector. Economics graduates can now be found in a wide range of commercial organisations, multinational corporations, investment banks, and top-tier consulting and professional services firms across the globe. Hence, they need to be equipped with a wider knowledge base and a diverse skill set that will not only improve their employability, but also help them to excel in the highly competitive environment of these organizations. So it's not about getting your dream job, but it's about keeping it and doing well in it at the end of the day. So I believe that the majority of universities are letting students down in this regard by not adequately preparing them for entering an increasingly competitive job market. To my fourth point, so there is a disconnect between the needs and demands of universities with respect to economists in academia and the needs and demands of employers with respect to practicing market or business economists. And I think this is probably the most important point, is that economics is very unique because it forms a wide variety of subset of specializations, and there's not many professions out there that do. And so it's very much dependent in a way on the direction that you go in. And you know, have we reached the point where students are actually forced to make this decision much early on so they can set up their future career? And you know, do you need to decide now if you want to be an academic or if you want to be a practicing economist? And is that what it all kind of hinges on? So I think that's a fair point to make. So again, you know, having spent a fair bit of time on both sides of the fence, you know, I have an understanding and great respect for both sides of this argument, and I certainly don't have the solution to this. But, you know, throwing it out there, maybe one option is maybe the time has come to have two streams of economics. So one which caters for the needs of universities and one which caters to the needs of the wider job market, where undergrads must decide, as I said early on, in the university career, what the future actually holds for them. And if we're going to do this, perhaps those two streams also require different teachers and methods of teaching, where the former is taught by academic economists using traditional research-focused teaching methods, and the latter is taught by practicing economists and business leaders using more interactive and contemporary teaching styles that give students an early feel for the nature and complexity of economic and business problems and issues being faced by society in the 21st century, and equips them with the toolkit necessary to meet these challenges. So to my final point, so the school of thought we're most focused on to date is the neoclassical school, and an article which was published in The Age newspaper by Tim Thornton from Swinburne University School of Politics and Education in May last year argues that the historical, narrow and simplistic focus of economics degrees on a neoclassical school is leaving 21st century graduates ill-equipped to properly assess the policy options and decision-making process in front of them, and so they're not able to respond to the substantial challenges faced by the global and local economies today. So, in fact, it has been argued that this is one of the reasons why many leading economists fail to predict or anticipate the global financial crisis. And economic students as a whole seem to be dissatisfied for three main reasons. So, firstly, there is generally no required study of economic history or the history of economic thought in most degrees out there. So this produces graduates with dangerous levels of historical amnesia, if you will, in regard to the world and to the discipline they assume that they understand. Secondly, contemporary economic students will rarely encounter any of the schools they compete with, that compete with the neoclassical schools. So, for example, institutional, post-Keynesian, behavioral, Austrian, feminist, ecological, all the hundreds of other schools that are now out there. So these economic schools, which come from all points of the intellectual and ideological compass, make crucial contributions to building up our understanding of a complex and ever-changing economic and social world. And thirdly, and lastly, the curriculum fails to incorporate crucial insights offered by other disciplines such as business, politics, philosophy, history, sociology, and psychology. So that's all I have to say at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So while I get my presentation up, I'd like to say that I am extremely proud of having trained such good students. Okay, so I'm arguing for the NA case, which shouldn't be confused with the other NAI case, which is Greek for yes, and didn't get up, by the way. But anyway, so economics. So I'm going to think about, is it still a choice? I teach, as most of you know, at one of the major universities in the state, at the University of Queensland. So the question is, following from what is happening in England, are the major departments still relevant, and are we still there? And what about the quality of training? What about the relevance of our degrees? Okay, so here are UQ's enrollments: bachelor's, master's, diplomas, certificates, coursework in economics that have an econ degree since 2008 in the global financial crisis. As you can see, here it is 2014, all numbers are still going up. So it is still a choice. People are still enrolling in economics. In fact, the dual degrees, we have engineering students, B Econ, B Engineering. We have science students, dual degrees. So B Econ is still very much a choice. What about the quality? Well, let's see. If you ever been to US university, you would know that most of the time, if you do an undergraduate degree, there will be a PhD student teaching your classes. That's not true here. Every one of us teaches first-year courses and undergrad courses, although we do research as well. Our second-year courses, most of the time, is the material that is taught in senior years in third year in the US. Our third-year courses often taught from textbooks that, if you look at the preface, will say, this is a textbook written for the first-year graduate course. And we use it here in third year. Our honor students are so well thought after that government, private sector, US universities, European universities will give them scholarships and jobs long before they finish. The master's program has now gone through the new AQF, that's the Australian quality framework. And from now on, stronger programs will become stronger because the quality has been, the federal government is imposing a number of important conditions so that these programs meet quality. PhD programs, since our students finished in the last few years, we have been including coursework, putting milestones. People need to meet all sorts of conditions, and that means our quality is most definitely going up. So what about economics itself? I think most of us can agree that some of the areas where we have actually improved quite a bit has been in the behavioral area, regulation, health economics, market design, that sort of work in economics, and quantitative because of computers. Now, these days, you can actually Google, econometrics, and you will get SAS, big data. Everything is it's out there with all of this. And this is what an economics degree teaches. And if you look at the Bachelor of Economics at UQ, the proportion of students that have already declared, some don't declare a major until they finish, but when they do, within their years, as you can see, quantitative methods is growing. This is the second most important, or preferred, if you like, major, and people are still there. There are trends here that cannot be ignored. I Googled jobs. I got oodles of them, absolutely oodles of them. Most of them say economics, econometrics, yes. So quantitative methods is clearly important. I mean, there's no doubt about that. In fact, next week, a New York company is meeting with us looking for students that do quantitative methods at UQ to go for internships. So I think things are moving on. What about government? As Alison said, one of the important roles of economists is still the government area. I mean, business degrees do not qualify people typically. That's not the sort of training that government departments want. They want people that learn to think and to solve problems. And therefore, if you look at Career Australia, that's what it says. Is that true? That's what the website says. Looking at UQ again, because it's all the data I have, since 2008, our graduates have gone to the following. This is actually actual data. I'm not giving you the numbers, but we've had graduates into universities in Australia, New Zealand, US, Taiwan, and Vietnam that I know of, international agencies, World Bank and IMF, government sector, RBA, ABS, ACCC, private sector, a large number to the private sector, and of course a number of new internships. And as I just said, internships is now beginning to be part of our degrees. In fact, we now have an internship program that has just started so that all our students can actually spend time in the workforce and obtain what is clearly an important issue, which is in the job training during their degrees. And this is for masters and undergraduates. So, how am I doing for time? Okay. Can we do things better? Of course we can. I mean, I think the master's programs, not all of us know that there have been issues in the past, but I do think that with these new regulations, strong programs will become stronger. PhD, we sometimes have trouble competing with Europe and the US. However, we are, improving. And of course, at the end of the day, our training is very individual because there are very few PhD students. So you have the advantage of having us to yourself. Yeah? One supervisor, one student. Can we do things better? Of course we can. Do we need saving the whole system? Of course not. Thank you very much.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Farhana. I'm going to say that economic education is what we are teaching is not perfect. We need change. But what is the success of economic education so far? What do you think? I think the success is all the economists have been very successful in convincing people that what we do is very difficult and people won't understand it even if the economist explained it to them. Why? Because it's too technical, too mathematical. From my experience in teaching, tutoring at Adelaide University, I asked a student, why you are here? Because it is compulsory. And they don't feel intuition, they don't feel like, yeah, we have very good students, I am from economics, but yeah, like other students from not majoring in economics, they think that, okay, we don't feel it's too mathematical. And what I am able to successfully teach them, like to make rational decisions, so what they do, they end up in going to the botanic garden and end up not coming to the class. So they can make a rational decision, actually. So actually what I'm trying to say, we have to be meaningful understanding of development of a society and how the world is working. Students should connect themselves with economic tools so that they can make the intuition how the world is working and say, because the world is complex. So, and economic education is totally theory-based, mostly emphasizing economic modeling to mathematical. And and also economic education is mostly based on like the narrative of economic education, that is the goals and belief which are intellectually monoculture. So what I'm trying to say is economic education is mainly based on mainstream economic paradigm, that is neoclassical and neo-Keynesian. So, but there are other different paradigms that have to be something to contribute, like all the heterodox paradigms. They all have their weakness and strengths because they all make rational assumptions about ethics and politics. Economics students and the economic policymakers should have more sophisticated view of the world. Students should learn the necessary tools in terms of different paradigms. And the reality is very complex, and therefore it is necessary for the student to know the different theories and try to apply different theories in different contexts. And the teaching of economic history is absent in current economic education. And the economic history is important because we need to understand the past before we can understand the present. What's the problem in real world? Like you can say the Greece and like GFC and other crises, like which cannot be explained by what the classical or neoclassical theories are teaching. And if a student or general public understand economic institution and goals, then the economists can take people with them. So therefore, I'm trying to say that the economic education needs to change in such a way that they can learn how to think, not what to think, like what is like mathematics, and not to create modeling, just to make the intuition. That's it, thank you.
Okay, that concludes the case for and against, apart from the rebuttals. So the nay side gets to go first. They get 5 minutes. They are allowed to use anyone who wants to step up.
We each want to rebut, I think.
Each want to rebut, take it away. So 5 minutes for the nay rebuttal, then 5 minutes for the yay rebuttal.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. So much to talk about, so little time. But let me pull out the things that really hit me in the face. Economic history. I couldn't agree with you more about economic history. And I'd like to point out that there's a revival of economic history beginning in Australia. We have at the ANU the Centre of Economic History, which is pulling in the disparate economic historians from all over Australia, because there needs to be some central organisation of these. There's a lot of interest in economic history, so I really agree with you about that. It is so important, so important. I'd also like to say that the rebuttal is coming now. Behavioural economics. Now, neoclassical economics is completely old-fashioned. We don't do that anymore. We do behavioural economics. Well, if we're not, we should be. We should be doing it. And there's going to be a session on Thursday about behavioural economics. And I would thoroughly be delighted if you could squeeze that into your attendance record. So I'd also like to say that this idea that economics degrees should include communication and writing skills. Now, this is where a term from economics really comes into its own, opportunity cost. If we are going to spend our time teaching how to write, how to communicate, we're not going to have time to communicate the important ideas of economics. And so I really think that if business wants people who can write and orientation skills, presentation skills and so on, what some universities should be doing is moving into that niche and providing, there's a degree in, or maybe several degrees in Britain called Economics and Creative Writing. Now that's one that I really love because I do both. But you could have economics and business communication or something, so that I do want to rebut that. I just don't think that that is appropriate for us to be teaching. I also thought with Abby that what you were saying was an argument about that the binary system is a good one, moving back to that. I don't want to talk for too long, though, because I'm sure that Alicia has got a lot to say as well. But one final thing is that economics in Australia has been doing brilliantly. Just look at the global financial crisis, and just look at how we weathered that better than any other developed country. We did fantastically in the global financial crisis, and we have Australian economists who managed that. We had Martin Parkinson, we had Ken Henry, we had David Gruen and countless others. So that's all I've got time for. Thank you.
In the time that I have, I would just like to say that the world moves on, and you guys haven't been at university for a while, and we now have a huge amount of flexibility, and the most important thing, I think, is all these internships embedded into undergraduate and postgraduate degrees by coursework, and this allows us to provide one of the biggest issues, which is, I understand, the ability to go to the workforce with some practice behind your wings. But the other thing I wanted to say, to finalize, is that the idea that we need to stream things, I think, is a terrible one. It is a terrible one because if you turn around and say there's going to be economics for majors and economics for non-majors, here are the academic ones and here are the non-academic ones, all that is going to lead to is that most of it will end up being some business studies and not real economics. And so we want to stay with we want to keep all our flock together, and what we want to do is be more flexible and talk to them and give them the options. And of course, we have certificates, and we have undergraduates, and we have masters. So there are a huge number of options that really will stream people into different things. Industry wants people well trained. Perhaps certificates, graduate certificates, and masters are the way to go. But the basic undergraduate degree must be still be strong and wide, and of course, emphasize thinking. Thank you very much.
Not sure where to start. Bit confused, actually. Not sure if the nay side argued for us, and so we don't actually have to rebut or not. So anyway, but to be honest, I think the arguments came across as defensive and desperate. And really, when you have to point at stats and straws, there's not a lot left. So, bit concerned to the referrals about some business studies. I would have thought that economics and business goes hand in hand, and so therefore needs to work together. And maybe that's why they didn't see the GFC coming. So, bit of a concern. Also, not quite convinced that Australia got through the GFC because of Australia's economists as such. Might have been due to, I don't know, $900 handouts or whatever. But, so, just putting that out there. Also, increasingly more concerned that economics now seems to be turning into a bit of a cult where we want to keep all our flock together. Again, not quite sure what that's in referral to, but quite sure the flock has moved. I certainly have, so gone over to the dark side of business, God forbid. Obviously completely lost all connection to economics heartland. So, where to from here? Not quite sure. Couple of thoughts. Is the focus too much on postgraduate education? Absolutely, it is important. Research is important. Research is the heart of academia and universities, and it's absolutely important to produce strong economic research out there. But in focusing on that, are we leaving the massive undergraduate population behind? I was a first-year undergraduate student at one point, sitting amongst 800, 900 people, and then when I was tutoring first-year micro macro, the classes just doubled in size, it seemed, almost. But then you got to second year and you're staring at a class of 100 people. So what happened to the remaining 900? And I think that's the problem. You know, we start out with these massive flocks of classes, but you know, we gradually get smaller and smaller and smaller, and we end up with an honours group of 10, 20 students. And where do they end up? I have personally coached at PricewaterhouseCoopers, you know, the winner of the ESA Queensland's Best Economic Students Prize, and yet she didn't get a job offer at PwC, even though I fought tooth and nail for her. So how is that possible when our top students are literally being left behind? What does that say about the future of the system? If the system is so sound, that surely should not be happening. And if we can't even get our top students into the best jobs that they want to go into, what's the hope for the remaining of the population? I think that economic education absolutely should be tied to industry. I mean, at the end of the day, we're supposed to come out with strong policies, and how can we do that if we do not connect and talk to industry and business all the time? I don't see lecturers, academics coming and visiting offices of multinational corporations to see what the real issues are. It's not quite the same as staring at a textbook. And you know, working out a problem in a textbook is not quite the same as working out a problem in real life. And I think that's where people get undone, really. So the fundamentals are still important, absolutely. They're crucial. The fundamentals are absolutely critical, but it's all about how are they going to be applied to real-world problems, and I think that's where, at the moment, there is massive disconnect. So I think it's easy for universities to sit behind stats and say, oh, look, you know, we got 90% take-up in first-year undergrad, and, you know, but it's not about quantity, it's about the quality of the education that you're putting out there. Surely that's what's more important at the end of the day. So, and also, surely if the top universities of the world can't produce students with good oral and written communication skills, then what are we doing exactly? I mean, what is the piece of paper actually worth? So, you know, surely that should be the most important factor in all of this. You know, if they can't communicate, if they don't have basic sound communication skills, then I think we've already failed them. So, you know, that's a worry. Perhaps we are too focused on what the US wants. You know, it might be great to produce Australian graduates who are, you know, in the front line to JP Morgan or, you know, the Federal Reserve or whatever. Well, what about what Australian employers want? It's not that different, but surely we need to start here first and communicate again and work together with Australian employers and industry to cater for their needs. Because surely we don't want all of our economic graduates heading over to the US. That won't be ideal, and probably will not see us through the next GFC if we believe the opposition. Anyway, I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, you've heard all the arguments. The nay side says it's a good thing there's no economics left in Scotland. The yay sides think none of you can communicate. So I wish you to refrain from written and oral communication. Go with pure show of hands. I'm going to tally them because apparently the math skills are still okay, so I can count. So who thinks that the yay side had the better arguments? Rise, all ye. 1, 2, 3, 4. Many, many, many. Okay. Who thinks the nay side has done the better arguing? Call me a mathematician. I think the nay side has it. Glory to our winners. The dungeons to our losers. Do we have a prize? Eternal fame? Scorn? Next year they are going to have to be the administrators?
You guys are this year's losers, that means that you have to be MC for next year's debate.
Ah. Next year you get to be where I am, that's right. Now, because this is an important topic on which, of course, we all have an opinion, we now move to an open panel discussion. And the way this is going to go is that you pose the questions, and you can pose it directly to one of the panelists, or if it's out in the open, I adjudicate an answer. So, shows of hands. There are microphones here, but you can also just shout. Who has a question on this topic? There you go.
I support Alison's point that communication skills should be left for high school to do, not university.
Thank you. That's a point, not a question. Can I have a question?
Does the quality matter? I mean, I would have thought that most employers are really looking for the signalling effect of somebody who's actually completed an economics degree. And they always win when they get somebody in the office that person doesn't know what they're supposed to know, all the stuff about the business. But they're always just picking on the person who's got the best marks, the best brain, and the best connections based on their birth, and therefore only going for GA is probably not a problem because it's more of a creamy signal for them. So is it a quality issue? Is it a signaling thing?
Do you want to have a go?
Is this on?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Thank you for the question. I think
Shout a
it's
bit
is this on?
Yep. Give them that.
Okay, so I think there is a huge signaling issue. In all seriousness, what Alison is pointing out is important for all of us because what happened in the UK, we've only had 2 ERAs. They've had a lot of them, and we know what is happening, right? And so the likelihood is that the top schools will, be the economics school, and everything else will go. And of course, it is a signaling issue, and I don't know how you solve it. I mean, unless there is regulation or something, I mean, we need to do something to stop that, lower socioeconomic groups to, so if you cannot go to a top university or you don't have the connection, what do you do? I mean, so, this is something we need to think about, I guess.
But aren't businesses recruiting for that signal? They're recruiting for the connection, they're recruiting for all the things that
Yeah, perhaps. So what do we do? Get people to be very connected? I don't know. I mean, it's a good question.
I'm going to flick the question to the young economist side.
Is this mic working?
No.
Where's the on?
Fail.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Just shout. Yeah. Shout out this time.
Oh, no, it's okay. Hello?
Can you repeat the question again? Sorry. Just a bit lost.
Is it about signaling?
Is it a signaling issue or is it a quality issue? If businesses are recruiting for a good signal or something's come from a good university, they've come from the right place, and therefore that's what they want, they want marks, that's what the economics degree is giving them. It doesn't matter what about the quality of the degree. That's the
I think it's a quality issue. Like, there's no doubt. I think gone are the days where signalling was, I mean, there's so many smart top students out there, how do you, and, I've done this personally, I've been involved in multiple recruitment assessment centres where you're trying to differentiate between 6.9 and 7 GPAs. I mean, it's just the pool is so much larger than it used to be. So it's not good enough anymore, really, to just be the top. It's much more than that, and employers know that, and they're after a lot more. They're demanding a lot more, and that's why the top students are failing to get through. So it's not enough really to just signal and say, oh, look, I'm here, I'm smart, look at my transcript, it's right there. So, you should hire me because I'm special, but you're not special anymore. That's really what it comes down to. So that's it.
If it's really just oh, did I make it
Another
work?
question.
Excellent. Oh, can I just answer this question? If it was
You're not on the panel. We had this last year. No, you can't. I think.
So the graduates who can apply the theory, you're looking for them to have that theory, but then you want to see the ones who can apply it and have the attitude and the teachability. You don't want them coming thinking they already know everything and they're prepared to learn. So I guess maybe if you could comment on how you think we could address that problem.
So you're disagreeing with him as well. You're basically saying there's a skill there, application skill.
I just wanted to reply to the previous question, which I didn't get a chance to, just very briefly, and that is to say that if we are going down this route of having fewer universities offering economics degrees, I think we also need to couple that with scholarships to students who may not have been able to make it through the standard route to the G of 8 universities, the ones from, I think we need to have some financial assistance for these people. And there must be some way of doing that that is not necessarily the same as what Christopher Pine had last year when he was talking about funding for higher education. I mean, that might have been the best aspect of his policy, but I do think we need to go that route because I think that there are, all of us have been saying really that there are strong externalities in having for our society and having well-trained economists. And
Can we have another question?
well, her question hasn't been answered.
Do you think your question has not been answered? It sounded like a comment on him, really. Yeah.
I'd like to address Alison particularly, because you were kind of making the case that kind of Australia is not too bad compared to the UK. In actual fact, like the crux of what, you know, from what I could see, and I must admit, I've just come from the UK, and I've just been at a conference of 400 students in the UK arguing for heterodox economics and pluralist teaching. Now, it seems to me that you are arguing that, we actually have got behavioural theory, but I don't know all the ins and outs of what is taught in the Australian institutions now. But believe you me, people probably aren't aware, but actually in the UK at the moment, there is such a strong movement to say that economics is in a crossroads. And for you to stand there and actually kind of defend it when actually the Queen was at the LSE.
Don't you forget that I was on one side of the debate. So you have to take this with a grain of salt.
So there you go. Their side should have won. If you're saying no.
I'm not quite sure what your question was.
So my main kind of question, though, is actually it would be helpful, because you were making the case that, we accept that the teaching should be actually more pluralist. And you were kind of saying, actually there's kind of history of economics, but it didn't seem from the student's perspective, it didn't quite seem that strong that actually there is quite a kind of pluralist teaching.
The institutional economics, yes. I have read a very interesting paper recently called Adam Smith, Behavioural Economist. And I think that we went the wrong way with neoclassical economics for some years in the mid to late last century. I understand that there's a place for institutional economics. And I think that, if we're talking about niche universities, we could, if we wanted to, have people who are offering degrees that were in both types of economics. I mean, there'd be nothing wrong with that, and that could be a niche degree that could be offered somewhere that would attract a different set of students. And I think in terms of trying to get more students into economics, having these joint degrees is often a very good idea. So I don't know if that answered your question. Sorry? Social entrepreneurship. Yeah, well, why not? That's...
What about the fintech sector as well? The fintech sector is a new financial sector.
I think that some of these questions should be kept for when Wendy Cullen is here on Friday, because she... Yeah, I've read your paper, actually. I know who you are. Yes, I've read your paper.
You can find each other later, that's right. Humphreys.
I believe there was a reference by someone earlier to the idea of two streams of economics. I think we almost had the same reference just then. Does anyone here want to comment on that currently exists in UCED with the Department of Marxist Political Economics? Anyone has a commentary on the success or otherwise of the UCED project?
Can we ask the young economists whether they have an opinion on this?
I just made the point, so I don't think
Okay. You don't want to comment again? Do you want to comment on?
Does UCED work?
Well, it seems to be saying there are already two types of economic streams, right? So there are two schools of economics.
Where they teach economics, and the Department of Political Economy, where they teach Frank Stilwell's Marxism.
Oh, I see. Okay. Are you from City University?
No, he's from us. I'm sorry, they declined to answer. Can I have the next question, please?
My question is for the panel. Now, I wonder whether economics education is unnecessarily elitist in the sense that it attracts and rewards a certain type of student who is good with mathematics, who is able to think analytically. For example, I received really good marks in social science, international law, international relations. I struggle with economics, but if it was more practical, if we were running through cost-benefit analysis, if we were going through econometric modelling in a more practical sense, I'm sure I would have done a lot better and have a lot to offer this. So I wonder if there's ways we can widen it up and make it more accessible.
Are we too elitist?
Why aren't you up here? This is a tough one, especially when one of your past lecturers is sitting right there and your past head of school is sitting right there. So, look, I don't think it's necessarily a question of elitism, although on occasion it could seem that way. I think it's more of a lack of information. I don't think that when you start your economics degree, a typical undergrad actually fully understands just how broad it is and all the options that are actually there for them. And it is tough because you don't know. You know, you're there to study first year micro, macro. You don't know what the options are there for you. So how can you therefore structure your degree? Also, you may not actually know what your future career looks like. So that's an issue. But I do think that this is where universities do have a responsibility to ensure that all economics graduates, you know, no matter where they might choose to end up, do get out of university with a core set of skills, which includes things like being able to do a basic cost-benefit analysis, you know, having critical applied thought thinking, you know, just those basic, you know, core written, oral communication skills, all, you know, and then if they have that solid foundation, then they can go on and do whatever they want, and surely it should set them up for a career either way. If they want to be an academic or they want to be a practicing economist, it shouldn't really matter. So I think are universities failing students in that regard? Yes. But I don't think it's necessarily a question of elitism, because we don't want to lose the best economic schools in the country either, you know. So it's important for it to be a competitive discipline, absolutely. So, yeah.
Yep, Farhana wants to answer as well.
So that's in my argument, what you have asked that actually I want to explain. Like when I was doing tutoring, like I saw a lot of like student, they got the good marks, like high distinction, and like end of the semester came to me, Farhana, can you tell me like what's the opportunity cost? So, so actually, I don't know, for the first year student, like you said, like the commerce student, like my my concern was the student, like all we are here, we did most of us, we did our major in economics. So that's actually, we are enthusiastic about economics, but who actually do the economics, like law, and like international politics, and they go to the workforce and become like say policy maker or minister. I think they should understand like how the world is work and what's the economics is about. So my concern is like how we are teaching, like in the first year we teach, okay, economic agent behave rationally, but like what you have said, like behavioral economics, but we don't teach in the first year principles of micro that there is other school of thought that is behavioral economics. People don't think rationally, and the like neo-Schumpeterian and evolutionary economics and institutional economics, they don't maximize efficient allocation of resources, because they think about like how the institution is working, like how the government. So that's why I think the student struggle about the non-economics. They can't make connection with like they cannot relate. But when they go to the like policymaker, become minister, like say Julia Gillard is a lawyer and like become a prime minister. So we have to think about like actually like when it's come to the like Greece problem, like people are going to vote. Like I was watching, like we don't know, like we are say yes or no. So for the development, I think we should teach the student actually. We are actually love economics. That's why we want to save economics. So teaching to think about like broader perspective, like rethinking economics. So yeah, they can make connection.
Alicia, do you want
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to pick up on Abby's point, and I think one of the things that we are not doing right, and we should do more, is to think about how we advise. So our system of advisors, I don't think is well thought, in that students sometimes take to second or third year before they realize they could have done all of this, but they didn't. And so I think it's important that we try to have both at the undergraduate and even at the master's level, people that are us, academics, and not perhaps somebody completely removed. Sometimes, this advising happens from, much higher, like say faculty, faculty offices and things like that. That, I think, is a bad thing. I think we should be more involved in advising. There should be a bunch of us that students can go to and say, look, this is what I think I'm better at. What can I do? And then you look at your program early rather than later. You don't want to get to third year and go, ooh, I should have done this, right? So, yeah.
more questions?
Yeah.
Thanks. One of the things that was touched on was the gradual removal of students as you go through the years. And I wonder if that's the right way to teach economics. It hasn't been touched on. I'm thinking in particular, 20 years ago, Deirdre McCloskey wrote a letter to a grad student in the Eastern Economic Journal. And she wrote, this is in 1997, "It's comforting to know that everyone feels that the first year of graduate student economics is a waste of time, demoralizing and unscholarly. It's comforting, but realistic. You have to go through it, like Marine boot camp or late-night internships in medical school. Is that the best way to teach economics?"
Should we let the economists go first? I think that's something to say about this early on.
That was great. Very interesting. Look, I think as someone who has taught first year economics several times, it's not the easiest course to teach because, yes, micro, macro is mandatory for most disciplines now in first year. So you do have a lot of students sitting across from you who have absolutely no clue why they're there. And openly say to you that they don't want to be there because they have no interest in studying economics. However, I think that comes back to the educators. It's your job, really, to inform the general public, if you will. And these people will go on to different careers. They're not all going to become economists, but it's important for them to still have a strong understanding of fundamental economics, and I think that comes really back to the educator. It's your job to educate them and show them the relevance of what they're learning and how it will be relevant to them despite whatever it is that they go on to do in the future. If nothing else, at least hopefully they'll be better equipped to vote, for example. They'll have a better understanding of government policies or an understanding of what's happening in the financial system. So, and I think at the end of the day, that's all you can do. So hopefully by having a more diverse range of students that we're teaching to, hopefully it's not seen as something that we're forcing them to do, but hopefully they come out of it seeing the value of having done that. And I think the majority of them do. So, and the same can be said for dual degree holders, for example. I did a dual degree, and I have friends who did dual degrees with economics who aren't working as economists now, however, still see the value of having done that. So, I think that's the responsibility that comes back to the academic, if you will.
Do you want to answer, Alison?
I just wanted to say that I agree with a lot of what you just said, and I think it's really, really important for first-year economics to be taught by someone who's senior, experienced, and preferably with a good sense of humour, because it's not an easy one to teach. I've tried teaching it. I was not good at it. I was so glad to be taken off it. But I know other members of this department, previous ones, who've got a real gift for it. And so I think that fobbing it off on somebody who, is unable to teach much anyways is not a good idea. It's just so important to keep people in. The battle is to keep them into economics, to get them interested, to think of all the exciting uses for economics, rather than to get bored with all those demand and supply curves and the long-run cost diagrams.
More questions?
Just to get an idea, thinking about what's taught in a typical economics undergraduate degree, and to think about what an average graduate of economics would do in their day-to-day lives in the private sector and consulting in a major firm or in working for the government. Do you think that what's taught in economics tends to reflect what's actually done by economists in their day-to-day life? Just a show of hands, has anyone ever used an Edgeworth box in real life? Really? Wow, okay.
Well, maybe if you work in the World Bank, yeah. So, it all depends.
The Edgeworth box is a teaching tool. Should be a better question was how they use general equilibrium in their working life. Because the Edgeworth box is a teaching tool about general equilibrium, not that being used as a tool to... It's a teaching tool. That's all it is.
So can I even go back to this question? The question is, do we need a core? Should we have a core, and what should be in a core? And even if it is painful. And, think back when you're a high school student, if you could choose what to do, you would never choose to do a lot of things. However, now, when you think back, you're probably very glad that somebody made you take, Math B or something, right? And so I think sometimes we all don't have the maturity, and an undergraduate degree is one of those places when people should have flexibility, but not enough, so that they do damage to themselves. And then that's, and so I think we have to balance that, and that's part of what we have to do at universities, I think, is to think what is the right balance. And I know maybe in your work, you're not going to use some of the things that we talk, but other people, will, and I don't know, just a balance.
Now, following up from that, I'd like to ask a question, which is that it's the cry of the ages that anything abstract and academic is not relevant for the real world. It doesn't teach you a cost benefit. I've not heard the word Excel file in my studies. But one can make the argument that economics is so successful as a policy science, is so successful at getting huge amounts of attention because we take people away from reality. We divorce them from the society they come from so they can look at it from outside. So we don't want to immediately make connections. We want to make that after a couple of years. So the people who say, oh, don't take me away from my society, please, talk about the local rubbish bin, you know. Is that really what we're about? That's what, you know, a high school does. Aren't we academics? We're supposed to abstract. We're supposed to make people independent from their society, observers of their society, seeing how it works. So this notion that things should be relevant immediately, it can be argued that, no, we want the opposite. Alison? Or...
We're just stunned, Paul. Just stunned.
Well, just a quick thought about economics as a metaphor. Because these tools, it's a way of thinking, it's an analytical way of thinking. And as a gentleman at the back was talking about the Edgeworth box, that is a metaphor, it's a beautiful metaphor for general equilibrium and analytical thinking. And this is what's so beautiful about economics. And like all sciences, there are metaphors which allow you to better understand what's going on in the real world, whether it's astrophysics or whatever.
More questions? I can ask some more questions.
Not quite sure I fully understood what Paul said. It sounded something like we should be aliens looking at Earth or something. But anyway, something similar to that. I think, look, one of the reasons I love economics, I've been studying economics since I was 14 years old, you know, like, what's wrong with me? But it is a unique, you know, profession, absolutely. You know, it has so many different sides, and I think that students should have the choice to experience all those different sides, you know, and so go and do a wide range of electives to actually understand it. And, you know, having done that, look, I work in the private sector, I work in consulting, and do I use everything I've learned over this time every day? Well, no, but doesn't mean that it's not relevant. And, you know, from time to time, you might come across an issue or a policy, and you actually do reflect back to, wow, you know, when I studied whatever. So the relevance is definitely there. You know, you think about game theory. One might argue that consulting every day is game theory in action. So, you know, it's true. You know, economics is a form of science, which again is something that makes it unique, and it's also about being able to think about things in different ways. So we don't want to produce graduates who only have practical skills in CBA and that's all they can do and they don't understand anything else, you know. I don't think that's quite the right argument, but it's about giving people broad education that allows them to make a choice in the future in terms of what they want to do. And it's about equipping them in that sense. So I think that's really at the heart of it. So, you know, nothing that we learn is a waste as such.
More questions? Shout.
I guess the discussion until now raises still a question about, I guess we should distinguish before we talk about whether or not a PhD graduate can work from, you know, drawing the Excel form or doing the IO form is there are specific different objectives or goals to be achieved for you to join undergraduate economic education or master degree education or the PhD degree education. For the example that Professor just mentioned, if you ask a PhD graduate student to do the private job to draw the Excel form and he failed, that just means he hired the wrong person. So I guess I want to hear more from the panelists about the specific advantage or disadvantage in achieving the specific goals in different degrees of education, economic education.
Anybody feel the need? Any takes? Abby, we'll give it a go.
I think what you say is true to a degree. So yes, you know, how successful you are in life is not all absolutely contingent on the quality of your undergrad or postgrad or PhD degree. So obviously it does come back to the individual. However, I think, you know, coming back to the argument that it's, you know, the basics should be there regardless. I think that's really the bottom line of what we're trying to get at. And if people don't have the strong foundation, then, you know, are we setting them up for failure? You know, it's difficult at the PhD level, I think, because what people choose to do their thesis on varies dramatically, you know, and it's not about saying that a policy-focused thesis or an applied economics-focused thesis is more important or relevant than one that it's more theoretical, you know, because it comes back to individual choice, I think, at that level. So it's hard to say, but I think more of the focus really should be at that undergrad level, really, when people are actually making those decisions, or it's about enabling them to make better decisions.
Okay, before I invite the last question, we're off drinking after this. I'm not allowed to call it the pub crawl, but apparently it's a pub crawl. It's in 10 minutes at the Lady Boundlaws, that's with the young economists, and then there is the subsidized one for the non-young economist at Old Government House, which I encourage everybody who's registered to go to. Cameron, as a former young economist, I think it's fitting you should have the last question.
Getting closer to the older economist side of the table. I guess, do the panel have a view, one of the views of the group in the UK, for example, that, you know, is agitating for change, and one of the views of the previous groups agitating for change is that economists are too focused on their methods. There's got to be an equilibrium model. Kabang! That's the next nail that I hammer with that. Oh, you know, there's some other problem. Oh, I'm sure we could have an equilibrium model. Kabang! Get that one. You know, another representative agent. Are we too focused on the method? Oh, that must be an equilibrium. We can model that. Don't worry. Should we be more focused on the problems, the economic problems, and incorporate many methods from across social sciences to study the problem rather than, oh, I don't worry, I'm an economist, I can create an equilibrium for that? Would you agree or disagree, I guess?
So we're behavioral science, right? And many times when you think about what sociologists do and other areas, I mean, we certainly have a lot of overlapping. And one would like to think that we are broad thinking enough to, when a problem comes, to think, okay, you know, sometimes you read a paper in political science and you go, wow, they actually came up with a very good idea for this, you know. So we are a little bit narrow-minded sometimes. I think that's probably true for almost all disciplines, but I think this is not economics only. You know what you know, you read the journals you read, you know, and you're not broad enough. But, and the system doesn't help us too, because sometimes, you know, you need to publish in the right journals and, you know, all of these sort of things. But interdisciplinary work, I think, is it's what you're getting at, and certainly within the behavioral sciences, there are other sciences such as psychology and sociology and political science that, you know, that certainly have a lot of overlap in many of the interests of the problems that we want to solve with economics, and perhaps we should try to, you know, make sure we work a little bit more together. I don't know, but yeah.
I think other student, like other discipline, like as an economist, we should incorporate other discipline. And I think we also learn like the history, politics, and other things as an economist to make better policy decision. Not only like we should incorporate them to economics more, other, not only mathematics and other. I think we also learn other thing as in like undergrad, and yeah, and like what the Paul said, like it is actually, I think, good feelings, like to be alienated, like it's give you more pride, like we are the economists, we make the monetary policy, we make the Reserve Bank, so no one can understand like what we do. So it's, I think it gives us like kind of good feelings. So, yeah.
Okay, my fellow aliens, that was it. I'd like to ask you to thank the panelists once again for a brave and good discussion. Well done.